There is an old saying among the jewelers who set the great stones of the great houses that paste will pass for diamond the whole of a season, and deceive every eye that goes looking for fire and is content to find it, but that it will never once deceive the one eye that learned the true stone at a workbench, and knows in the dark its cold weight and the hard clean edge that glass has not got. A thief may lift a duchess's diamonds off her very throat and leave a copy so fair she might wear the glass to her grave and never know. But there is always somebody who handled the true stones, a jeweler, a setter, a poor overlooked woman who dressed her, who could tell the one from the other blindfold. And the whole art of catching a jewel thief is to find the one eye the thief forgot. For a thief reckons up every constable and magistrate who might trouble him, and never once reckons the plain gray woman by the fire that nobody has looked at in 20 years. Eleanor Vane, Nell, to the 2 or 3 below stairs who were fond of her, had lived at Wyverne Hall as its poor relation for 21 years, and in all that time scarcely a soul above the rank of housekeeper had troubled to learn her Christian name. She was 40 when the story begins, a spare, plain, quiet woman with a still gray gaze and steady hands, dark hair going early to gray. So unremarkable that a guest might sit an hour with her and go away unable to say there had been a 4th person in the room. That was her whole strange gift. She was the one nobody saw, and so she was the one who saw everything. She had come to Wyverne at 19, an orphan and a charity, after her father, an honest jeweler and lapidary who had set stones for half the good houses of 3 counties, was ruined when a great lord who owed him near £1,000 refused the debt and blackened the tradesman's name for a cheat rather than pay it. He had not the purse to fight a lord at law. His custom fell away on the whisper, and he died within 2 years, called a thief to the last. Nell learned before she was 20 the lesson she never unlearned, that in England a great man's word is believed, and a plain man's truth is not, and the whole distance between them ruins the innocent every day of the year. She kept from her father 2 things only. When the tools and the very benches had gone to his creditors, his small jeweler's loop, through which she had first learned to look into the heart of a stone, and his folding brass gem scales, on which she had learned before she was 10 to weigh a true stone against a false one. For that was the thing no charity ever took from her. She had grown up at a lapidary's bench with a diamond in her small fingers before she could read, and she knew stones, true from paste blindfold, by cold and weight and hardness, a reset collet from an untouched one, the round bubble and flat molded culet that betray glass where an untrained eye sees only fire. At Wyverne she made herself into the things such houses use and never see, the poor relation who reads to the half-blind old lady, writes the letters the gouty old gentleman cannot manage, and sits up the long nights with the sick, at every table and in every sick room, and never at the center of anybody's thought. What the county said behind its fans was uglier, and she knew it. Let a plain, penniless spinster be a poor relation under the same roof as an unmarried duke, and the drawing rooms will settle in an afternoon what they would not trouble to ask in a year, that she is a schemer, a fortune hunter who crept in by the charity stair and means to creep up by the great one, and that a woman of her age and empty purse can have no business near his grace but the oldest and most shameless in the world. Nell had heard the word fortune hunter reach her from behind a fan more than once in 21 years, and had learned to let it break over her like weather, but never so thoroughly that it did not each time cost her something. Her particular place these last years had been with the old Dowager Duchess of Wyverne, Cordelia, mother of the present Duke, who had died that spring after a long, dreadful sinking, and whom Nell had nursed and dressed and read to through the worst of it. And so Nell, alone of all the household, had dressed the dowager for her last evenings, lifted the famous Wyverne diamonds from their ebony case, and clasped them at that proud old throat 100 times, and put them back with her own hands. She knew every true stone in the great rivière, the little flaw like a seed in the 7th brilliant, the faint blue cast of the pendant drop, the small clasp stone her own father had once, in his good years, been given to recut, and had marked the private way that setters mark their work. And she had noted, without the least notion she was assembling the key to a ruin even then being prepared, that they were true and whole in their case on the last night the dowager ever wore them. The trouble came up to the house on a warm afternoon in June, 2 months after the funeral, and Nell, mending the dowager's lace in the still room with her father's loop pushed up on her brow, did not think herself concerned in it at all. "You'll not have heard, I'll wager, Miss Vane," said Susan Platt, the young parlor maid, hanging in the doorway with her cap askew. "It's all over the servants' hall. There's a jeweler come down from London to price the old Duchess's things for the lawyers, and they had out the great diamonds, the famous ones. And the London man's gone white as a sheet and says they're none of them real. Glass, miss, paste, the whole rivière and the drop and the earrings, every stone false, and the true ones gone nobody knows how long. 30,000 pounds of diamonds turned to a shilling's worth of glass, and his grace shut in the study, and the whole house buzzing like a kicked skep. Isn't it a wicked thing, miss?" Nell's hands went still upon the lace. "Paste," she said, quietly, and did not look up. "The whole set, Susan? And who has said so?" "The London jeweler, Mr. Frome, that come to do the valuing, held every stone to the candle and weighed them and shook his head and says there's not a true diamond among the lot, only the copies are the cleverest he's seen, made by somebody that knew his trade. And they're all saying below stairs, miss, I don't like to say it," the girl dropped her voice, "they're saying the true ones must have gone this long while, and whoever had the keeping of the case and the key of it must know where. And the key of the old Duchess's jewel case, this year and more, hung on your chatelaine. It was you dressed her and put the diamonds by. And Mrs. Pruitt's downstairs this minute, saying so to anybody that'll hear her." Nell laid down the lace and sat very still, and something cold and enormous had begun quietly to open in the middle of her. Not fear yet, though the fear came soon enough, but the old recognition of a shape she had seen once before that had swallowed her father whole. They were true diamonds, she said, so low the maid barely caught it, on the last night her grace wore them, which was the 12th of March, at the assize ball, for I clasped them at her neck with these hands, and I know a true stone from a false one better than any man that ever came down from London. They were true then, and they are glass now. So somebody has changed them between, Susan, and it was not I." The maid stared. "But the key, miss, yes," said Nell, and made her plain gray face as empty as the window. "The key. Go down now, Susan. There's a good girl, and say nothing you've said to me to anybody else, for it will do neither of us good. His lordship's people will want me presently, I don't doubt." And when the maid was gone, she sat a long while with her hand flat on the closed loop, only holding it, and out of the window the June light came down gold over the park where the old Duchess was newly buried, and she felt the past come up under her like a cold tide. Her own father's blackened name, a great man's word believed over a plain one's, and thought, not again. Not while I am the one soul in the house who knows a diamond from a bit of glass. They came for her that same evening, and it was worse than the maid's chatter had prepared her for, because it was quiet and orderly and wore the face of the law. She was fetched not to the servants' hall, but to the great study, where the young duke stood by the cold hearth with his back half turned, The London jeweler, Mr. Frome, sat unhappy at the table, with the paste diamonds spread on black velvet. Mrs. Pruitt, the housekeeper, stood by the door with her mouth like a seam, and a heavy, florid, important stranger, she would learn, was Sir Rowland Massingham, the magistrate, sat squarely in the best chair with the air of a man at a distasteful public duty. She had seen the young Duke only at a distance since he came home for his mother's dying, Julian, 5th Duke of Wyverne, a spare, dark, reserved man of 33 with a fine grief-worn face and cool gray eyes that gave nothing away, who did not bluster but shut himself in the study and came away with a face like a closed door. He had loved his imperious old mother past the common measure, and come home too late to do more than sit her last week, and the theft of her famous diamonds, the making false of the one splendid thing most particularly hers, had struck him. Nell would come to see, far below the mere money of it. He turned when she came in and looked at her with those cool eyes, and there was no warmth in them, and she saw with a small chill no great doubt either. "You are my mother's companion," he said, in a low-level voice with no color in it. "Miss Vane, you had the keeping of her Grace's jewels and the only key to the case. I dressed her Grace, your Grace, and put her jewels by after," said Nell. "And I carried the key of the case, yes, this year and more." "Then perhaps," said the magistrate heavily, "before the Duke could go on, you will save this melancholy business a deal of pain, young woman, and tell his Grace plainly what has become of the true stones. Mr. Frome here, a man of the first eminence, has satisfied us these are counterfeit, and cunningly made, and the genuine diamonds abstracted and disposed of. The case was locked. It was kept in the strong closet. You alone held the key. I have committed men for trial on a great deal less, and I'll be frank, it will go easier with you now, and easier at the assizes if you make a clean breast of where the diamonds are, and who had them of you, before this goes further. I cannot tell you where the true diamonds are, Sir Rowland, because I do not know. I never had them, and never took them, and until this evening did not know they were gone. But I can tell you a thing you have not asked, worth more than a confession. For a confession is only a word, and this is a fact. Those stones are paste, as Mr. Frome says, but they are new paste. Give me leave to look, and I will show you and his Grace and Mr. Frome himself that whoever made this copy made it within the 12-month, in gold not a year worn, and that her Grace's true diamonds were still true and still in that case on the 12th of March, when I clasped them at her throat before 40 people who saw them blaze. And I will ask one question in my turn, Sir Rowland, that no one here has troubled to ask. If I had the true stones this year past, and could have gone off with them any night and vanished, why am I still here? A penniless woman mending lace in a dead woman's still room, waiting to be accused? Miss Vane's father, Sir Rowland, said the London jeweler, speaking for the first time, looking at Nell with new attention, if she is who I begin to think. Was there a Vane, mistress, that had a shop at Harnford, a lapidary that recut the Downshire rubies 30 years gone? For that was the finest hand at recutting in the west of England, and it was cruelly used, and I have never forgotten the work. He was my father, said Nell. Then, Sir Rowland, said Frome, you may let her look. If she has a tenth of her father's eye, she will read them quicker than I did, and I am reckoned to know my trade. So they let her come to the table, the gray overlooked woman they had summoned to accuse, and she took her father's loup from her pocket and set it to her eye, and bent over the paste diamonds in the candlelight, and read them the way her father had taught her before she could read her letters. And what she found she told them plainly as she found it, so every soul in the room could follow. See the setting first, before ever the stones, she said. Her Grace's revire was set 60 years ago, in close collets of a soft old gold worn thin and bright at every edge with 3 generations of handling. I have felt those worn edges 100 times, fastening it. This gold is new. Look, under the loop, at the collet rims the file marks still sharp, the burnish still hard. Nowhere in the hollows at all. This necklace was made up within the year. A copy made years ago to a slow theft would sit in old worn gold robbed off the true piece. This sits in fresh new gold, cut new. So the swap was lately done, this spring or this winter past, by somebody who paid a jeweler, lately, to make it. And I, Sir Roland, have not had the price of a yard of ribbon to call my own in 21 years. Now the stones. Mr. Frome has told you truly they are glass. I will only show you how any of you may know it and take no man's word, not his and not mine. Here she took the little folding scales and set them up, and laid the great false pendant in one pan, is the drop that apes a stone of near 40 carats. Weigh it. Glass of that bulk weighs heavier than diamond, near half as much again. For diamond is a light stone for its size, see, the beam goes down like lead. That is not a diamond's weight. And here she tilted it to the candle and held the loop for the Duke himself. In the heart of it, a little round bubble, such as rises in molten glass and never in a stone, and the point beneath, that in a true brilliant is cut to a sharp culée, is here left flat and molded. Bubble and flat culée and false weight, it is glass, your Grace, past all arguing. And you need not believe me, you need only look. The young Duke bent, and looked through the loop where her steady finger pointed, and was silent, and something had gone very still in his grief-worn face. And now the last thing, that I did not look to find. She had turned the necklace over to the clasp, and held it under the loop, and when she spoke her voice was not quite steady. The great stones are all glass. But the little stone in the clasp, the least of them, that a hasty thief would never trouble to copy, this one is a true diamond still. And I know it, your Grace, better than any stone in England. Here on the girdle, this tiny scratch, 3 strokes like a bird's foot, is a setter's private mark. It is my father's mark. He was given this stone to recut in his good years when it chipped, and marked it as he marked all his finest work. And I have seen it 100 times through this very glass, fastening this very necklace at her Grace's throat. That is her true clasp, her true necklace, robbed of its true stones and filled up with glass this spring, by a hand that did not know the one stone he left was real, and marked, and would speak. She straightened and folded her hands. So there is your theft, gentlemen, and there is not a word of my own belief in any of it, only weight and bubble and worn gold and my father's mark, that you may all test and take to any honest jeweler in the kingdom. The true diamonds were here and true on the 12th of March. Somebody with money and a jeweler changed them for new glass this spring. And the only thing that points that theft at me instead of at him is that I held a key, which is the emptiest proof of the lot, and which I will come to. I did not think, when you sent for me, to be, let's say, even this much, and I ask only that you do not commit me tonight for a thing I can prove was done by another, if you give me a little time to prove it. The magistrate looked at the scales, and the loop, and the little true stone winking in the clasp, and at the paste blazing false beside it, and blew out his cheeks. A slow man feeling firm ground turned soft. "I'll not commit you tonight," he said at last, grudgingly. "There's more here than I was told. But mind, mistress, the case was locked. You held the key. And that is a hard fact that will want a harder one than a bubble in a bit of glass to answer it. You have till I come again. Find me your other hand, or I'll have no choice but to do my office." And the young Duke saw him to his carriage, and came back and stood looking a long moment at the gray woman who had not moved, with an expression she could not read. "You dressed my mother every night of her last year," he said at last. "Lo, you knew those diamonds, and you knew the moment the maid told you that they had been true in March. Why did you not come to me? Why wait to be accused, and then defend yourself, when you might have come the first hour and said there was a theft here, and it was not yours?" "Because you would not have believed me, your grace," said Nell, "without heat, and you know it, or you would not ask. I am the penniless companion who held the key. If I had come to you unasked and said the diamonds are false and it was not I, what would any man think? But that the thief had grown frightened and was running ahead of the hue and cry to cover herself? My coming would have been the surest proof against me. I could not clear myself by speaking, I could only clear myself by proving, and I cannot prove without your leave, for the case, and the men who must be sent for are all yours to command, and none of them mine. So I waited till I was asked, and told the truth, and offered to prove it. It is the only road a nobody has, your grace. We may not accuse. We may only, if we are let, be proved right." The young Duke was quiet, and something moved behind the cool gray eyes that was not warmth, but the first crack in a certainty. "The second key," he said slowly. "There is but one key. It hung on your chatelaine. That is the whole of the case against you. That is what I must prove to you next, your grace, and I shall need a day, and your leave to send to 2 or 3 men, and your word that Mr. Vaughn is not told what I am about." And she saw the name strike him, and strike him hard, and knew she had reached at last the thing she had most dreaded, for she had known, since the maid's first chatter, whose ready money and easy run of the house must lie under a theft so lately and cleverly done, and had prayed uselessly it might prove to be anyone in the world but the one man whose guilt would cost her most to prove. For there was a man who had preyed upon that grieving house, and his name was Crispin Vaughn, a cousin of the Wyverne family through a female line, a petted favorite of the old dowagers, a charming, well-made gentleman of some 34 years, the pleasantest company in 3 counties, a man everybody liked and nobody watched, who came and went at Wyverne as freely as a son of the house. He had a warm laugh and an open hand and the whole county's good opinion, and one thing besides the county did not know. He was ruined. He had gamed himself quietly into some £15,000 of debts of honor that no estate of his could ever pay, and had spent the winter with the noose of his creditors drawing tight, a charming man walking a plank with a smile. And in the ebony case in his dying aunt's dressing-room lay £30,000 in old diamonds the half-blind old lady would never miss, that no one would think to value until she was dead, and by then, if it were cleverly done, the loss might be laid at another door. She went first. Next morning, not to the Duke, but to the one man whose word no one could call a schemer's, old Bellamy, the house steward, who had kept the plate and the keys and the strong closet 40 years, a lean, upright old man with tired, honest eyes. She found him in his room off the pantry and stood in his doorway, a plain gray woman he had passed 100 times and never truly seen. "Mr. Bellamy, they are saying I stole her Grace's diamonds, because I held the key of the case. You have kept the plate of this house 40 years, so you will know a thing I need and can swear to where I cannot. When the old Duke had that ebony jewel case made for her Grace, how many keys were made to it?" The old steward looked at her a long, still moment. "Sit down, Miss Vane. I've kept the keys of this house since before you were born, and I never once thought you a thief, whatever Pruitt's been braying below stairs. That case was made in London the year of the old Duke's marriage, and it came with 2 keys, as such cases do, a wearing key and a strong key. Her Grace carried the one, and after her illness you carried it. The other was always kept in the strong box in this room, on the 3rd hook, labeled in my own hand. And Miss Vane, he rose, stiff and sudden, and went to the great iron box and unlocked it, and stood very still. The 3rd hook is bare. The strong key of her Grace's case is gone, and I did not take it off, and never missed it. God help me, for who in 40 years asked for the strong key of a case that was never opened but by the wearing key upstairs? When did you last see it on the hook, Mr. Bellamy? Can you swear to that? I can, near enough, said the old man, sitting slowly down, shaken. I turned out this box and listed every key at the audit, the week before Christmas, and I'd take my oath the strong key hung on its hook then, for I checked every label. So it's gone since the new year, had off this hook, in this room, by somebody with leave to be here, and the box wants my key or a picked lock, and it was not picked, for I'd have seen the scratches. He looked at her, the truth dawning gray in his face. There's not above 3 or 4 people in this house I'd leave alone in this room a minute, and one of them's family. Do not name him yet, Mr. Bellamy, even to me, said Nell quietly, for we are not to break a man on a guess. My own father was broken on less. But will you do 2 things? Will you come, when I ask, and swear before his Grace and the magistrate exactly what you have told me, that the case had 2 keys, and the strong key is gone from your box since Christmas, unpicked, by a hand that had leave to be here? For that is the whole case against me gone. It is not true that I alone could open that case. And will you find me, out of your old accounts, the casemaker's bill that lists the 2 keys in black and white, that no man may say we invented the second between us? I'll find you the bill, and swear to the box, said old Bellamy grimly, and glad, for I've kept this house honest 40 years, and I'll not have it said a thief was made under my keys and an innocent woman hanged for it. But swearing to his Grace is ticklish, Miss Vane. He's shut as a fist since his lady died, and trusts nobody, and there's them about him that would be very pleased to have this buried quick with you at the bottom of it. You'll want more than an old steward's word and a bit of a bill. What else have you? I have a footman's broken arm, I think, though I have yet to prove it, and a jeweler somewhere who made new glass to an old pattern this spring, whom I must find, and my father's eye, which is worth more than all the rest, though no court will weigh it. Help me to the bill and the oath, and stand by me before his Grace, and I will find the rest. And the old man took her ink-stained hand in his dry one, and gripped it hard, and that was the first ally Eleanor Vane had made in 21 years at Wyverne, and she went out of the pantry with her heart a little less alone than it had come in. The footman's broken arm she came it sideways, through Susan, and through her own exact remembering. She had asked herself, lying awake, when the swap could have been made, and the answer was plain. Only after the dowager ceased to wear the stones, that is, only in the weeks after her death, while the case sat locked in the strong closet awaiting the valuing. And those weeks, they all said, the strong closet was watched night and day by the under-footman turnabout, and one name she remembered, because the man was Vaughan's own creature, put into the house on Vaughan's word and forever at his elbow, a big, sly, close-mouthed footman named Amos Kettle. Susan, she said, cast your mind back to Easter week, when the house was full for the funeral and the strong closet was watched of nights. Amos Kettle was one that watched it, was he not? So it's set down in the day book he was, miss, 3 nights that week and 3 the next. I've seen it, for it's Mr. Bellamy's book and I dust the shelf. Amos Kettle, on the strong closet, the whole of both weeks near enough. And yet, said Nell slowly, I have a memory, Susan, and I want you to tell me if it is a true one. Was not Amos Kettle thrown from the gray cob in the paddock that same Easter week, and his arm broke? And did not Mr. Prentice the surgeon come out from Chalcombe to set it? And was he not abed a fortnight with a fever off the bone? I carried him a posset myself one night, being the only one not too grand to do it, and his arm was in splints to the shoulder. He could not feed himself, let alone stand a watch. Susan's eyes went round. Why, so he was, miss, so he was. Thrown the Tuesday of Easter week, and his arm broke, and Mr. Prentice out twice to him, and he never off his bed a fortnight. However did he watch the strong closet 6 nights with his arm broke to the shoulder? He did not, said Nell softly. A man cannot keep a night's watch senseless with a fever and his arm in splints. Amos Kettle's name is set in the daybook as keeping a watch his broken arm made impossible, and the surgeon, Mr. Prentice, that set the arm can swear to the very nights under his own hand. Somebody wrote a false watch into that book, Susan, to make it seem the closet was guarded when it was not, so that when the loss was found there should be an unbroken watch to point at the one person outside the watch who had a key. At me. And whoever wrote it chose Amos Kettle's name, not troubling to remember that Kettle lay that fortnight flat on his back with a broken arm. But it was not old Bellamy, in the end, who brought her before the Duke. It was the Duke who sent for her, and when she came into the great study, she found him alone at the window with his back to the room, and there was that in the set of his shoulders that told her the interview would be hard before ever he turned. Sit down, Miss Vane, he said without turning. Bellamy has been to me. He tells me the case had 2 keys, that one is gone from his box since Christmas, and has shown me an old bill that bears him out. So the plain fact I was so sure of, that you alone could have opened that case, is not a fact at all. He turned, and his gray eyes were troubled now, and searching. And that leaves me where I like very little, for if another hand did this, then some person of this house, with the run of my steward's room and the money to buy diamonds of glass, robbed my dying mother and set a trap to hang her companion for it. And there are not many such persons, a very short list of those who had the run of this house, and the sore want of 30,000 pounds. And I find, God forgive me, some low part of me would rather it had been you, a stranger I owe nothing, than the man whose name I see at the head of that list, and cannot say aloud, because he is my own blood, and my mother loved him. And Eleanor Vane looked at the proud grieving man who had, without meaning to, laid his whole heart bare, and understood him entirely, because she had spent her life watching people who did not know they were watched. You would rather it were me, she said gently, because if it is me, it is only a theft, and you may be sad, and it mends. But if it is the other, then the last of your mother's blood that she loved has robbed her in her grave and tried to hang an innocent woman to cover it, and that does not mend, and you must be the one to break him, and you cannot bear it. I know that feeling to the bone, your grace. It is the very feeling my own father's ruiner counted on, that a great man would rather believe a plain man a cheat than take the pain of proving him honest. But I will not make it easy by being guilty, for I am not, and I think you have stopped believing that I am, or you would not have sent for me alone, and told me this. The Duke was silent a long moment. No, he said at last, low, I do not believe you are the thief, which is why I sent for you before Massingham comes again, to tell you that if you prove this thing to the end, you will not be proving it against a nobody. You will be proving it against my cousin Crispin Vaughan, whom this whole county loves, and who will not scruple to see you hanged to save himself. You are a penniless woman with no friend but an old steward. He is a gentleman of family with the good word of every drawing-room in the shire. If you go on and stumble, he will bury you. I give you the chance, if you wish it, to hold your tongue and go quietly away with a character and a little money, and save your neck. I could not blame you if you took it. You could not, your grace, and no one could, and it is a kinder offer than I have had in 20 years, and I thank you for it. But I will not take it. Not because I am brave, I am frightened this minute, but because I have seen the other road walk to its end. My father walked it. He held his tongue and let the lie lie rather than fight a great man, and it did not save him, it killed him slower. That is all. A lie let alone does not go away, your grace. It settles into the ground and poisons the well. I will not spend my life, the woman the county half believes stole the Wyverne diamonds and was too clever to be caught. I would rather be hanged proving I did not than live pensioned and pitied and never quite cleared. So I will go on, but in the open, before you and the magistrate together, and prove every step so hard no charm of your cousin's can melt it. And I will not name him, I will only lay out the theft, and let it name him. Will you let me? I will let you, said the Duke, and drew a breath like a man stepping off a height, and God help us both. Massingham comes again on Thursday. You shall have this room, and Bellamy, and the surgeon sent for, and the day book, and the bill, and every account of my mother's you ask for. And I will have my cousin here to answer it. For if this is what we both begin to fear, he shall answer it to my face, and not by a smooth letter from town. And if you are wrong, if you have led me to accuse my own blood on a bubble in a bit of glass, I will not forgive it, of you or of myself. Do you understand me? Perfectly, your grace, said Eleanor Vane. Then let us make quite certain I am right. She spent the 2 days in the hardest work of her life, and Bellamy would not leave her to it. They found the Clerkenwell casemaker's bill in a dusty account box, and there in a dead clerk's copper plate stood the item plain. 1 jewel case of ebony and brass, with 2 keys. They had the surgeon Prentice out from Chalcombe with his own day book, and there under his hand stood the days he had ridden to Amos Kettle's broken arm. Falling exactly across the nights the household book swore Kettle kept his watch, and he would swear no man with such a fracture and fever could have stood on his feet that fortnight. And Nell, going through the paste by daylight, found the maker's habit in the goldwork, a particular way of closing each collet claw, milled with a fine cross-hatch to hide the join, and knew that if she could find the bench where that was the workman's trick, she would find the man who made the copy, and behind him the man who paid. The great study was full of clean morning light on the Thursday when they were assembled, the Duke at the head of the long table, still enclosed, the magistrate Sir Rowland heavy in the best chair, the London jeweller Frome grave and attentive, old Bellamy by the strong box he had carried in on a barrow, the surgeon Prentice with his day book, and, easy and smiling at the table's foot, arrived that morning in answer to his cousin's summons, and plainly not dreaming from what quarter the wind blew, Mr. Crispin Vaughan, turning a great seal ring on his finger, with the good-humored patience of a popular man humoring a solemn house. Miss Vane, said the Duke, you have had your day, and the bill, and the surgeon, and the book. Say now, before us all, what you have found, and let any man here fault it who can. Mr. Vaughan laughed, warm and easy, and spread his hands. Your Grace, forgive me, but is this quite the thing? My aunt's own woman, I mean no unkindness, to stand up and lecture a magistrate and a Bond Street jeweller upon a robbery she is herself suspected of? It has the air of setting the fox to cross-question the hounds. Your suspicion of me is exactly what is in question, Mr. Vaughn, said Nell, not loudly, but it carried the length of the room, because it did not shake. I shall dispute no word of the law or the trade with these gentlemen, for they know both, and I do not. I shall only show you all the diamonds, and the case, and the book, and let them speak, and every soul here may see with his own eyes, and believe no word of mine. May I begin, your grace? Begin, said the Duke. And here is the thing that undid Crispin Vaughn, and turned the bright study by slow degrees to a silence you could have heard a pin drop through. She did not accuse, and did not flourish, and did not raise her voice. She simply showed them the theft. There are but two things that must be true for me to be the thief, and I shall take away both before your eyes. The first is that the copy was made long ago and the stones taken slowly, so a penniless woman with a key had years to do it. The second is that I alone could open the case. Take the first. She laid the false reveille on the black velvet. This copy is new. The gold is new cut and unworn, Mr. Frome will bear me out, for I showed him yesterday, and he owns it. The London jeweler inclined his head, grave. It was made within the 12-month, and by a particular hand. See, the little claws of every collet closed with a fine cross-hatched milling to hide the join. That is one man's trick, and I have seen it from one bench only. Whoever made this paid for new gold and new glass this spring, and I have not had a shilling to spare in 21 years. This was no slow, poor woman's theft, but a lately bought and dearly paid one. A companion may have a confederate, said Vaughn pleasantly, but he had stopped turning his ring. A follower who finds the money. It proves nothing but that the thief was not a pauper working alone. Then come to the second thing, that I alone could open the case. Here is the casemaker's own bill, of the year her grace was married, one jewel case of ebony and brass with 2 keys. 2 keys, gentlemen, I carried the one, and Mr. Bellamy, that has kept the keys of this house 40 years, will tell you where the second lived, and where it is now. And old Bellamy stood, and swore in his grave, shaking voice that the strong key had hung on the 3rd hook, checked present at the Christmas audit, and was gone now, the box unpicked, taken since the new year by a hand that had the run of his room, and he opened the box and showed the bare hook. So it is not true I alone could open that case, said Nell. A second key was made, and kept in this house, and stolen off its hook this spring by someone with leave in the steward's room. The whole weight of the charge against me was that one key. One hand, and there were 2 keys, gentlemen, and the second is in the thief's pocket yet. The magistrate had leaned forward, all his heavy importance turned now to a frowning attention, for he was a conventional man, but not a wicked one, and did not like, any better than the next honest man, to find he had near committed an innocent creature to the assizes. Go on, he said. The watch. You spoke of a watch. The watch is the 3rd thing, and the plainest, for it needs no eye of mine, only a date. When could the change be made? Only after her grace ceased to wear the stones, that is, only in the weeks after her death, while the case lay locked in the strong closet awaiting the valuing. And those weeks, we are told, the closet was watched night and day, and here is the household day book, and here, 3 nights in Easter week, and 3 in the week after, is set the name of the footman who kept the watch. Amos Kettle. She turned to the surgeon. Mr. Prentice, the dry surgeon, rose with his day-book open. Amos Kettle, he said, was thrown from a horse the Tuesday of Easter week and broke the bone of his right arm clean across, high, a bad break. I set it myself and bled him. And he took a fever and lay senseless 2 nights and helpless a full fortnight. Here are the days. He could no more have stood a night's watch those 6 nights than danced a minuet. I'll swear it before any court in England. And he laid his book by the household book, and the days lay across each other, plain as a slap. So the watch was a fiction, said Nell into the stillness, written into the book after the fact, to make it seem the closet was guarded and none could come at the case but the keeper of the key, at me. And whoever wrote it chose the name of Amos Kettle, being one of that fortnight's watchers, never troubling to remember that Kettle lay the whole fortnight with his arm in splints. It is the false watch that hangs the whole matter, your grace, for it is a lie told on purpose, with intent to fix the guilt on the key. A bubble in glass might be chance, and a lost key a carelessness, but a false watch written into a book is a thing done knowing by a guilty hand. This is monstrous, said Crispin Vane, and the warmth had gone thin in his voice. A farrago, a servant's arm, a clerk's slip in a book, an old bill. You would hang a mystery on a mare's nest of coincidence and call it proof against whom? You have not even the courage to say a name. I say no name, Misty, Vaughn, because the theft has a shape, and the shape will find its own name without my help. But there is one thing more, and you shall believe not one word of mine, only your own eyes. And she took up the false pendant, and from her pocket a small clear pane of glass, and laid it flat. A diamond is the hardest thing there is, and will cut glass where glass only slides on glass. Watch, and she drew the great false pendant hard across the pane, and it slid and squeaked and left the glass unscored. That drop apes a 40-carat diamond and will not scratch a window pane. Now, the one true diamond the thief left in the clasp. And she drew the little clasp stone across the same pane firmly, and it bit and sang, and scored the glass with a deep bright line clean across, so that Sir Roland started and the Duke leaned in. The little stone cuts glass, being a true diamond, the great ones will not, being paste. You have seen it with your own eyes, and taken no word from me. The Wyverne diamonds are gone, and glass is in their place. It was done this spring, with a second key, by a hand that wrote a false watch to hide it. That, your grace, is the whole of the theft. I have only read it, I did not do it. The bright study was utterly silent. The magistrate sat back slowly, a heavy man rearranging a settled world. Frome was looking at Nell with open reverence. Old Bellamy had tears in his tired eyes, and the young Duke was not looking at the diamonds at all, but at his cousin Crispin Vane, who had gone the color of tallow, and stopped turning his seal ring, and was staring at the little scored line on the pane as a man stares at his own name on a warrant. "You are very quiet, cousin," said the Duke, in a voice gone very quiet and very terrible. "Miss Vane has shown us a theft made this spring, with a second key, hidden by a false watch, paid for with ready money by a hand with the run of this house. She has been too delicate to say a name. I find I am not so delicate. Where were you, Crispin, the Tuesday of Easter week and the fortnight after? For you were here. I have your own note that you were here. And you had the run of Bellamy's room. And you have wanted money this year past as a drowning man wants air. Take up that little stone and draw it across the glass, and then take the great one and fail. And tell me before these gentlemen your aunt's true diamonds are not in your creditor's hands this minute." Crispin Vane looked at the little true stone, and at the scored line on the pane, and at the ring of still faces, and did not put out his hand, because he knew, as well as she did, what the glass would show. And the silence of his not daring went round the bright study like a cold draught, and was a plainer confession than any words. He had built 34 charming years on the certainty that no one beneath him would ever dare check his word. And a woman in a gray gown had drawn a little stone across a bit of glass, and every soul in the room had seen the truth cut clean across it. "This is a conspiracy of servants," he said, but the charm had cracked to a dry rattle. A steward and a sawbones and a jeweler's brat got up to ruin a gentleman. But even he heard how it fell into the silence, and did not finish. He looked once round the ring of faces and found not one to meet his eye, and he rose and went the length of the study, upright still but walking fast. And at the door he turned and looked at Nell with his pale, ruined eyes, and said softly, so it carried, "You are a very clever woman, Miss Vane, for a lady's companion. It is a pity. Clever women who forget their place are so very easily shown to the world for what they truly are." And he was gone, and the threat hung cold in the sunlit air, and Nell, who had watched her own father broken by exactly such a man, knew he was not finished, and that the next battle would be fought not over the diamonds, past all saving now, but over her. She thought she would prove the last of it, and recover the stones and go quietly back to some corner of some house as she had always lived, and in that she was wrong, and this time for the rest of her life. For she did not go back to any corner. She was given the whole tangle to trace, and through the long bright summer she worked it to its root. The maker's cross-hatched claw she carried, with Frome's letters from bench to bench through 3 market towns, until in a back street of Chalcombe she found the man, a shabby, drink-ruined jeweler named Silas Crake, once a fair workman and now a hired hand for any gentleman's quiet business. And Crake, frightened and promised he should not hang if he told the truth, gave up the whole of it. How a charming gentleman with a great seal ring had come in the winter with the Wyverne Riviere itself, and had him make new glass to every stone, and took the true stones to sell abroad, all but the little clasp stone Crake told him was too poor to trouble copying, neither of them knowing it bore a dead lapidary's mark. And Crake had the greater part of the true stones by him yet, meaning to recut them slyly against the hue and cry dying down, so that the most of the Wyverne diamonds were recovered whole out of a locked drawer in his back room, and came home and were set again, true stone by true stone, in their old worn gold, the little marked clasp stone among them. So the thing stood whole and proven long before summer's end, in a sheaf of sworn papers no court could refuse. The theft, the maker's confession, the recovered stones, and the black motive under it all, that Crispin Vaughan run some 15,000 pounds into secret gaming debts he could no more pay than fly, had robbed his dying aunt of the one treasure no one would miss until she was dead, and meant, when the loss was found, to let it fall upon the penniless companion who held the key, and see her hanged in his stead. He had reckoned every soul in the business, the trusting duke, the pompous magistrate, the credulous county, the very servants, and left out only the one beneath all reckoning, the poor relation bred at a lapidary's bench, who knew a true stone from a false one in the dark. And through that same summer the young duke came down to the great study morning and evening, where Nell sat setting the recovered stones and drawing up the sworn account, and asked her questions, and, stranger yet, listened to the answers, and by degrees so small neither could name the day. 2 solitary people bent over the same honest work found rank thinned almost to nothing between them, and a grieving man could not go on pretending the woman who had saved his mother's honor was beneath his notice. "They are afraid of me," he said one gray afternoon, both at the long table while a summer rain ticked at the window. "Every soul on this estate. I say a lease is renewed, and the man thanks me before the words are out of my mouth. Massingham was ready to hang you rather than trouble a duke's family with a doubt. And you told me to my face I had a low part that would rather you were guilty than my cousin. And you were right, and never softened it. Why do you never flatter me, Miss Vane, when the whole world does? Because the whole world wants something of you, your grace, and I want nothing, said Nell, not looking up from the stone she was setting. A place, a rise, a favor, a fright spared, every flatterer in your house has a reason, and the reason is always himself. I have a loop and a pair of scales and an eye my father gave me, and the good name of Vane, which is worth nothing to a living soul but me, and not one of the three is in your gift to give or take away. A person who wants nothing of you is the only soul who can afford to tell you the truth. You would do well to keep one always by you. They are worth more than the cleverest man of business in England, and a great deal harder to come by, and they never once send in a bill. He was quiet at that, and she did not see the look on his face, for she had learned young that men say the truest things when they are not looked at, and presently he told her the thing he had told no one. I was so ready to believe it of you, he said, low, staring at the rain. A nobody off the charity stair, how much easier than the truth I could see at the head of the list and would not read. If it was you, my mother was only robbed by a servant, a grief a man may carry. But if it was Crispin, then the last of her own blood she loved robbed her dying, and would have hanged an innocent woman to hide it, and to break him is to lose the last warm memory I had of her affection. So I looked hard at you, because you cost me nothing to condemn. You held the truth up to the glass and made me look. I am not sure I have forgiven you. I am quite sure I never want to be without you again. He had not meant to say the last of it. She saw him hear it, half a beat after, and go still. She did not look up from her stone. Then do not try to forgive me, your grace, for I did not do it for thanks. I did it because I could not do otherwise, because a bit of glass cried out across a table that it was lying, and I have never been able to leave a lie lying in a stone. My father was the same, and it cost him everything. You should know the whole of me, since you have told me the whole of you. He was an honest jeweler, robbed of near £1,000 and his good name together by a great lord who found it cheaper to call him a cheat than pay him, and he died of it inside 2 years, called a thief to the last, and I was 19, and could not save him. So when I saw another honest name about to be robbed, a dead woman's, a living man's, and my own, I could not sit by the fire and hold my tongue and be safe. That is the whole of me. There is no more. For the household had begun to feel the change, and it pleased them less than it pleased her. Mrs. Pruitt, the housekeeper, furious to have brayed a false accusation before the whole hall, took to a cold civility worse than rudeness, and let fall where she meant to be overheard that some folk who came into a house with one box and a charity's welcome had grown very grand of late, and that crying up a robbery to make oneself the one clever woman at a lonely duke's elbow was a bold new road to a coronet, and the county, hearing the duke's charming cousin was disgraced and fled through the meddling of the grey companion, did not say how brave, it said, over its port, that the designing vain woman had cooked up a wicked clever tale to ruin a gentleman and make herself necessary to a grieving duke, and they should all see within the 12-month what she had truly angled for. They think I did it to catch him, she said to Bellamy one day, not bitterly, only tired. Every soul from the still room to the Lord Lieutenant. They cannot imagine I did it because it was true. They think, said Bellamy, looking up with his tired, honest eyes, what small, comfortable people always think when one of the overlooked proves worth more than the whole gilded rest of them, that it must be by some low trick, since it cannot be by plain desert. For if it were desert, then any of them might have troubled to know a true stone from a false one, and dress an old woman kindly, and remember a footman's broken arm, and did not, and there is no thought less comfortable than that one. Pay it no mind, Miss Vane. You have given a dead mistress back her honor, a living master back his good name, and a parcel of true diamonds back their setting. If the county cannot bear the sight of that, the fault is in the county. And he took up the recovered stones and went back to helping her set them, and left Nell understanding for the first time that she stood between two worlds and belonged wholly to neither. Crispin Vane was not so easily done with as a man caught out ought to be. The Duke, unwilling in the raw first grief to loose a public scandal upon his own blood and his mother's memory both, had not yet laid the sworn case before the assizes, and Vane, with 34 years of good opinion to save and the gallows at his back, spent that summer not in shame, but in building a defense. And since the theft was past denying, his defense was not to defend the diamonds, but to destroy the woman, to have the meddling gray companion shown to the county as a scheming, half-taught fortune hunter, so no gentleman need weigh her word. In this he had ready allies, Mrs. Pruitt nursing her grievance, a pompous magnate or two, and the county's own sweet willingness to believe the worst of a plain poor woman who had risen. He came in the last week of August, when the sworn papers were all but ready, and the recovered diamonds home in their case, not humbly, but in a bluster dressed as injured innocence, with a sharp hired attorney at his elbow, and 2 credulous county gentlemen in his train, resolved to fight in the open, before the assembled household, where a poor companion might be shouted down by 34 years of gentility. He swept into the great hall where the Duke stood among his people, and flung out a hand at Nell, who had come down with the papers under her arm and stopped dead at the sight of the gathered room. "Your Grace, I come for justice," he said, loud and rolling. "I have been these 3 months a slandered man, my name cried down before the whole county, and upon whose word? Upon the word of that woman there, a lady's companion, a reader of sermons to a dead old woman, that came into this house 21 years ago with a single box, for her own father was a ruined tradesman disgraced as a cheat, ask where you will, and who has, out of the oldest ambition of her scheming sex, got up a farrago of broken arms and cracked keys and jeweler's cant to ruin your nearest kinsman and leave herself the one indispensable woman at a lonely duke's elbow. I demand she be given to the constable this hour for the theft she has so cleverly painted upon me. It's plain as paint, your Grace," put in one of the county gentlemen, red and pompous, "a fortune hunter and a low-born one. There's a word for women who worm their way toward great men by ruining honest gentlemen, and it is not a word I'll soil my mouth with in this company." Nell might have borne it in silence. She had borne a great deal in silence in 40 years. But she saw the young Duke draw breath to speak, saw in his face that he meant to fling his whole newly come authority before his entire household on the side of a poor companion against his own blood, and she could not let him. A great man may keep a clever eye by him. He may not be seen to stake his ducal honor on one against his kinsman, not without a whisper following him all his days that his mother's gray companion had bewitched him into it. She saw the whole of it in the half-second before he spoke, and stepped forward and spoke first. "No, your Grace," she said. "Let me," and she folded her ink-stained hands before her gray gown and faced Crispin Vane, and her voice was not loud, but it carried the length of the great hall, because it did not shake. "Miss Vane, you say I am a schemer, and my father a cheat. My father was an honest man robbed by a great man's word, exactly as you would have robbed me by yours. You say I did this to catch a husband. Then hear me, sir. Before them all, I want nothing in this house I did not bring into it. No place, no rise, no marriage. I have claimed one thing only, that I was bred to know a true stone from a false one, and no fine name can make glass cut a window pane, or a broken-armed man keep a watch, or one key be two. Those are not a woman's wiles, sir. They are facts, written in a surgeon's book and a casemaker's bill in the very glass, and they care nothing whether the eye that reads them sits in a great man's face or a poor woman's. She took a step, and Crispin Vane, to his own visible surprise, took one back. You say I got up a farrago. Then send for other eyes than mine, any honest jeweler in England, and set before him what I set before his grace. New glass in new gold made this spring, a case made with 2 keys and but one to show. A footman sworn to a watch he lay senseless through, and a true diamond in the clasp that cuts glass where the great ones will not. And send to Chalcombe for Mr. Silas Craik, whose hired bench made your glass for your money, who has sworn the whole of it to a magistrate this fortnight past, and named the smiling gentleman with the great seal ring, who brought him the stones to copy and carried them off to sell, and by whom the greater part of the Wyverne diamonds were found not 3 weeks since, in a locked drawer in his back room, whence they are come home to their case, while you stand here calling me a thief. It does not need me, Miss Vane. I found it, but I am not it. You came to put out the one pair of eyes that troubled to look, and you are far too late. The silence in the great hall was total. The late summer light lay gold along the flags, and no one moved. Crispin Vane had gone the color of tallow, and his sharp attorney had leaned in and was murmuring something low and final in his ear, having plainly smelled a hopeless brief and a client who had lied to him, and the 2 county gentlemen had taken a step apart from him, as men step back from one the crowd has turned upon. This is a plot of servants and paupers, said Vane, but the roll had gone thin as water, and no court will credit a drunken jeweler and a scheming. But even he heard how it fell into the silence, and did not finish. He looked once round the ring of still faces, and found not one to meet his eye, and he turned on his heel and went the whole length of the great hall and out at the door, upright still but walking fast, his attorney a half step behind, talking low of withdrawing from the cause, and the sound of his horse going off down the avenue came back up between the walls of the house. And Eleanor Vane stood in the enormous quiet with her heart going hard, and thought, with a strange calm, well, now I shall be turned off in my turn. For a great house cannot easily keep the grey companion who shamed its master's kinsman before the county. Miss Vane, said the Duke of Wyverne, and it was the first time in 21 years that anyone in that house had said her name as though it were an honor. Will you come into the small library, where it is quiet? There is a great deal I find I wish to say to you, and I had rather not shout it the length of my own hall. He shut the door of the little book-lined room behind them, where the low gold light of the late afternoon fell across the shelves, and one tall window looked down the home park, and Nell stood in the middle of it, with her hands folded, and waited to be thanked and pensioned off, and had her small speech ready, how she would go without fuss, and asked only a character, that she might find some other house that wanted a plain woman who could read a true stone. He offered her, first, money, a sum that made her sit down without meaning to. She refused it. He offered next to make her keeper of the family's jewels and plate for life, over any man of business in England, with a salary and rooms of her own and the freedom of the library, and this she did not refuse. But neither did she answer, for she could see it was not the thing he had brought her into the quiet room to say, and that he was working his way toward the true thing by the road of the easier ones. Julian, she said then. More quietly, she had never used his name, and did not know she was going to, and the sound of it stopped him as though she had laid a hand against his chest. There, I have said it, and the roof has not come down. Now say your piece plainly, your grace, and I will say mine, and let us neither of us be cowards about it, for I am too old to be courted round the houses, and you too honest to enjoy the doing of it. So he said it, plainly, in the plain words they had both come to trust. You stood in my hall not an hour since, and would not let me defend you. Do you know why that undid me, when nothing in my life has? Because I saw what you were doing. You saw, quicker than I did, that if I spent my name on you before the county, they would say you had bewitched me into it, and you would sooner take that man's filth full in the face, and be threatened with a constable, than let the defending of you cost me a shilling of my standing. A woman with nothing shielded a duke who has everything, and meant to walk out of my life without letting me thank her. And I understood, all at once, that in my whole guarded life I have never once been valued by a soul who wanted nothing from me. I am not offering you rank, he went on, and the level voice went for a moment unsteady. Rank is nothing. It came to me out of my mother's grave, and nearly cost an innocent woman her neck to a lie. I am offering the only thing I have ever found worth the giving, a partnership of equals, in the plain sight of God, my name to yours, and my judgment laid open to your plain sense every day we both live. Spend what is left of our years keeping me honest, for there is no one else alive I would trust to try it, and I cannot go back to being flattered now I have once been told the truth. You taught me the difference between being served and being told the truth, across a table of forged glass, and I will have no other woman in England but the one who taught it to me. They will say I am a fortune hunter, she said, when she could speak. They have said it for 21 years on no evidence at all. Marry me, and you hand them their proof, they will say it until I die, and some after, that the gray companion cried up a robbery to disgrace your cousin and creep into your bed, that she planned the whole from the first, that you were gulled by a designing spinster twice as neatly as your cousin thought to gull you. You know they will. You have lived among them. I know them to the bone, he said, and I do not care one straw for the opinion of people I do not respect, upon a matter they cannot understand, concerning the only happiness I have ever been offered. They will say the Duke of Wyverne married the woman who saw, with a lens and a pair of scales and one night's patience, the theft a magistrate and a Bond Street jeweler had laid at her own door, who gave my mother back her honor and me my good name and my house its diamonds, and who would have walked away and let them call her a thief sooner than cost me a shilling of my pride. Let them say it. It is even true, every word. And he held out his hand, not a lord's hand to be kissed, but a plain hand, open, palm up, level, between equals. Eleanor, I have asked you a question. You have never left an honest question unanswered to spare anyone's feelings. Do not begin now. And Eleanor Vane, poor companion of the House of Wyverne, looked at the offered hand and at the gray eyes that had learned, at 33, not to lie to her. And she gave him the truth, as she had given him nothing but the truth from the first hour, because the truth was the only dowry she had ever owned, and it turned out to be the only one he had ever wanted. Yes, she said, God help the pair of us. Yes, they were married in the small gray parish church at the edge of the home park, quietly, in the first week of October, with the whole scandalous county watching from behind its curtains, and not one of it invited. Old Bellamy gave the bride away and thought his old heart would crack with the rightness of it, standing in for the honest dead master and mistress whose diamonds and whose honor she had brought home, and Mrs. Pruitt, who had come to gape and stayed to be ashamed, wept through the whole service. And the Duke's shrewd old great-aunt, Lady Augusta, who had believed in Nell from the first hour, told the whispering pews that the boy had done the one wholly sensible thing of his life in marrying the only person under his roof with a pair of eyes in her head, and the courage to use them. And when the plain vows were said, the little church was so still they could hear the rooks in the elms. She never played the great lady, and never once tried. She wore good plain gowns, and of all the women in England, wore the famous Wyverne diamonds least. Though they were hers now, she kept instead her father's loop and folding scales in her writing table drawer, and the little marked clasp stone she loved better than the whole blazing revire, and went down to the strong room most weeks to keep the family's stones in her own exact account. And Crispin Vaughan, when the sworn case and Crake's confession were laid before the magistrate, found his charm and his 34 years of good opinion worth precisely nothing. He fled the country a step ahead of the constable, and died abroad some years after, shabby and disbelieved and small, a colder ruin than any Gaul. And over the mantel the late Duchess smiled down from her gilt frame, her honor cleared, upon the room where a gray woman had drawn a little stone across a bit of glass and given her back her good name. She taught, in the years that followed, clever young women under her, tenants and craftsmen's grown kinswomen, with quick eyes and no prospects, to know a true stone from a false one, to weigh and to look and to read a setting, and the plain arithmetic of hallmarks and weights and worn gold, that they might never once be gulled by a fine setting at the foot of a lie, nor robbed as her father was robbed for want of a friend who could prove them honest. And she and the Duke were the most quietly contented couple in the shire. And his Grace, who had come into his title grief hollowed and shut as a locked strong box, grew into a man at ease in his own skin, who could laugh and be argued with over a weight of a morning, and looked at his unlikely Duchess across the breakfast table as though he could not quite believe his good fortune, and never learned to take it for granted, which is the whole art of a long happiness. He lived another 28 years, and died at last in his own bed, his hand in her ink stained one and no stranger in the room. She sat with him at the end as she had sat over his mother's stolen diamonds at the beginning, still and true, and told him the truth to the very last, which was that he had been a great deal of trouble and worth every hour of it. And he laughed his quiet laugh one final time, and told her she was the one true stone he had ever been given, and slept, and did not wake. And she closed his gray eyes herself, and did not weep until the door was shut. She outlived him by 9 years, and kept the family's stones true to the end, and was, by the time she followed him, so beloved across that broad reach of shire that they lined the lanes for her funeral 3 deep. Tenants and carriers and the households of the women she had taught to know a true stone from a false one, far more than ever lined them for any duke, and among them not a few of the fine folk who had once called her a fortune hunter and a thief, and lived long enough to be ashamed of it. And they carried behind her coffin, on a cushion, not the famous Wyverne diamonds, but her father's small jeweler's loop and his folding brass scales, which the whole shire agreed was a stranger honor than any jewel, and no more than her due. There is an old saying among the jewelers who set the great stones of the great houses, that paste will pass for diamond the whole of a season, and deceive every eye content to find its fire, but that it will never once deceive the one eye that learned the true stone at a workbench. Eleanor Vane read to the elders of Wyverne for 21 years, and dressed its dying old duchess, and was given to a constable for a thief on the strength of a key, before a soul above the housekeeper troubled to learn her name, and never once called a false thing true to spare a great person's feelings. She was not saved by her meekness nor her beauty, for she had neither. She was saved, if saved is the word for the woman who did the saving, by the plain, unfakeable fact of what she alone had been bred to know, and by the courage to stake her very neck upon it, in a world forever dazzled by a fine setting and the simple arithmetic that says whoever held the key must be the thief. A thief who could buy any hand in England to make his glass and swear to his watch had forgotten the one eye he could never buy. The gray woman by the fire that nobody had looked at in years, and it made her the truest eye in the county. The tenants whose daughters she taught said it first, and the women she taught to know a true stone said it after, and in the fullness of years even the great folk who had scorned her came round to it too, until it was less an opinion than a fact of the country, worn smooth with the saying, that a plain gray-gowned companion with an old loop and a pair of steady eyes had dressed an old woman. Everyone forgot she tended, and knew her diamonds so truly that she read a theft the magistrate and the London expert had laid at her own door, and gave a dead mistress back her honor and a living master back his name, and asked nothing at all for it. And whenever, long after, a proud man was flattered toward his ruin, or a plain woman overlooked for want of beauty, or an honest name blackened by a great one's convenient lie, it was said that the one eye the thief never thought to reckon was the very one that undid him, and it made her the truest eye in the county. Thank you for listening to the story all the way to the end. Please tell us which city you are watching from, and what this story made you feel. And if it moved you, consider subscribing softly so you won't miss the next one.